Hello, my friends, and welcome back. Thank you very much for being with me again today. And the Russians won again through the same method they won in 1962 during the Cuban Missile Crisis. You might question my statement. What do you mean they won in 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis when we won by having the Soviets pull out their missiles, nuclear missiles in Cuba? Well, if you have this narrative provided to you from the United States of America's government, and not only, which is this much of the whole story, then stick around and I will tell you what really happened. It's not rocket science, but hey, you just need a few clicks to find out. So what happened? I'm going to draw a parallel between Russia's victory right now in Ukraine against NATO / United States of America. I mean, if you really think that it was about Ukraine and Russia, again, stick around. No, it was not about Ukraine and Russia. It was about United States' interest, or people harnessing United States of America, United States' interest, NATO's interest, and Russia's decimation. That's what the whole thing. And the Russians, again, they won. Why? Because they got this concession, the main concession, which proves the same victory as Khrushchev had over JFK. Right there. Ukrainska Pravda. Trump, Ukraine can forget about NATO membership. So if you don't understand what that is, I will explain. Again, this is from Russia Today. Ukraine can forget about NATO. The US president is the only Western leader to publicly and loudly admit the root cause of the conflict, Moscow has previously said. So what happened? Let's start with a missile crisis, Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. And I will start by showing you lies. And here it is. I'm just going somewhere where everybody goes to find out truth. Not injustice, truth, supposedly. So this is the first lie. Cuban Missile Crisis. Here, the Cuban Missile Crisis, also known as the October Crisis, was a 13-day confrontation. So the Soviets beat the Americans in 13 days between the governments of the United States and the Soviet Union, when American deployments of nuclear missiles in Italy and Turkey, here is the lie, were matched by Soviet deployments of nuclear missiles in Cuba. This is where the lie is. See, it is true that the United States of America deployed nuclear missiles. Jupiter, they deployed, they took them, put all the bases over there, put them over there. They were in Turkey and Italy. The Russians never never deployed any nuclear missiles in Cuba. There were no nuclear warheads and missiles deployed in Cuba. They were working on it. They were bringing tubes over there. They were bringing them, but it was so that's a lie. It was not matched by Soviet Union because Soviet Union never YouTube deployed nuclear missiles right there. They were never present in Cuba. That's the first lie that you were fed, probably. All right, what happened? I will tell you. So the Americans say now, no NATO for Ukraine. That was the main cause of Ukraine war. And now they say, no more NATO. NATO in Ukraine was the main cause of the war. Oh, I know it's unprovoked and unjustifiable. They tell us. Again, a lie. So, who won here? All right, man, no NATO over there, you won. Again, it took 3 years versus 13 days. Let's go to the Cuban Missile Crisis. Do you know how the Americans found out about those missiles and the construction sites? They were in plain view. Why? It was a meeting in Vienna between Khrushchev and Vienna, Austria, and JFK. And JFK destroyed nobody. It was Khrushchev who destroyed JFK. You can find that being true by his own statements, JFK's statements. He was drained. He said, this guy mopped the floor with me. I'm just paraphrasing, but something like that. So what happened? Khrushchev told the Americans, you need to take your missiles, Jupiter missiles. And the Americans did the same thing. Like this guy said, you need to take your NATO aspirations away from Ukraine. You're too close. And these guys said in 2021, no. Okay, we're going to have you withdraw your NATO garbage from Ukraine. We want to see how you're going to do. That's the exact answer the Soviets received by JFK's administration, the peace lover JFK. So then what did Khrushchev do? I'm going to have you take those missiles away. And they did. They said, we're going to do the same thing you did and see if you like it. So these Soviets dealt with Fidel Castro and they started building the sites and transferring the tubes on top, some of them, on top of the ships over the Atlantic, crossing the Atlantic. So the Americans were their spy planes. Oh my God, those are tubes. Wow, that's ICBMs. What are those? And that's how they saw it. And then they saw the sites and CIA said, FBI, please do something with JFK. All right, so they said, what's going on? The Russians are doing exactly what we did. So then they got very upset with Khrushchev and they imposed a blockade. And it was almost about to explode this beautiful planet. But it didn't. You know why? Because not Khrushchev blinked. Because JFK was staring in his eyes. That's how the story goes here with the Hollywood and these imbeciles. No. He looked in Khrushchev's eyes and Khrushchev was like, are you going to move your Jupiter missiles from Turkey? Yeah? No? Okay, keep going. And then the Americans agreed to pull their nuclear missiles away, the Jupiter missiles, in 6 months if the Soviets stopped transferring their weapons in Cuba. So Khrushchev said, okay, deal. So they say stop the construction, and the guys in 6 months, the Americans, took their tail between their fucking balls and moved back the Jupiter missiles. So who won again? In this case, right now, we have this statement. You can forget about NATO membership. Oh, I thought it was a done deal. Remember the statements of these baboons in NATO and the American presidents. NATO has, and Stoltenberg, the then General Secretary of NATO, which was just, a secretary just takes phone calls, makes statements, communicating the decisions made by important people. You know, this is what he takes notes. This is the secretary. So that's what Stoltenberg. Stoltenberg is not the owner of any country, of a big power. He's just a guy who let us know something other people decided. He's just a speaker. Who's at the microphone is someone else. So what happened? Remember when this guy said, well, NATO has an open door policy. Anyone can apply, ignoring the 1994 Budapest Memorandum, which clearly was signed by the Americans, the Russians, and some European countries, guaranteeing Ukraine's, how was that? Neutrality was broken in 2014 by the coup d'etat in Kiev, and NATO got in. So they say, no, everybody can apply. So we can stop, and since Ukraine is a sovereign country, that was the argument, can do it. It's not up to you, Russia, to say what Ukraine could do. Regardless, the Russians claim, that the principle of arming someone here at the expense of my security, that's a problem. I think it is the Montreux Doctrine, if I remember correctly, 1977 or something like that, where it says you can't arm yourself at the expense of the security, national security of the neighbor or the collective security. And that's exactly what the Russians said. So then what happened? All right, we're going to go to war. And after 3 years, this guy said, okay, you got it. No more NATO. Ukraine can forget about it. It doesn't mean that that's what's going to happen. This is talk. And remember, the Americans lied. Again, in 1991, again talk. They told the Soviets/Russians then, if you agree with the unification of Germany, East and West, then there's not going to be any 1 inch eastward expansion of NATO. It was a verbal promise. And the Russians said, oh man, these are the capitalists, this is the free world. These are the Democrats, these are the truth tellers. So we're going to believe them. Thank you, Mr. James Baker. Then the Secretary of State of the United States of America, he made his pledge. They broke it. So the gentleman agreement showed that these guys are not gentlemen. So since then, the Russians said, we're going to act accordingly, which they did. So they went to war. And when they went to war, after 3 years, these guys say, hold on, that's it. And I'm going to show you however you want to look at it right there. The whole point was no NATO troops in Ukraine. So when these guys are talking about the peacekeeping troops in Ukraine by NATO, this is baboonish. That's exactly what the Russians fought against, the deployment of NATO in Ukraine. So Russia opposes NATO troops deployment to Ukraine. The foreign minister has suggested that recent statements by France and UK about the possibility are meant to heat up the conflict. Moscow is not considering the possibility, not even considering the possibility of a NATO peacekeeping force being deployed to Ukraine. It's clear why. That's exactly the main reason why this war occurred over there and the Russians invaded unprovoked, is because these guys were coming to their porch, placing their missiles and bases. CIA had what? 12 bases, at least that we know of, reportedly. So who won? Again, the Russians had to fight a war and do the same thing to the other ones. Remember, if tomorrow the Russians will deploy troops in an alliance in Cuba, or let's say Canada or Mexico, the Americans will do the same thing they did in 1962. Oy vey, what's going on? You can't do what we can do. You know why? Because we are all equal, but some of us are more equal. That's the way it is, my friends. So who won? I think these guys won again, unfortunately, at the expense of people and countries and nations destroyed. Thank you very much for being with me again today. Stay strong, stay smart, look for the truth, and be just.